So we're all not strangers to the fact that bad habits exist in the world. And, with these bad habits can form addiction. And when addiction happens, it's hard because nobody wants to see themselves just addicted to something that's bringing them down. For many years of my life, I was addicted to so many bad things without ever thinking why I was addicted to them. For example, my phone is probably the worst habit that I still struggle with today. And before I, lessened my usage naturally with my phone, I always shamed myself for being addicted to my phone. And I was always asking myself questions like, why are you allowing yourself to have something so little have so much control over your mind? But then as I started thinking deeper about it, I started thinking about why I was addicted to it. Why I would always go on my phone when I was highly emotional and I didn't want to deal with all these crazy thoughts in my head. And, soon enough, I realized that I was being so difficult on myself and I was just being so unfair towards my addictions and just my coping mechanisms because I failed to actually ask myself the root cause behind what would make me run to these things. And, once I kind of figured out I was just trying to avoid it, I was just trying to avoid feeling like everything was crashing down all at once, trying to avoid feeling hopeless or anything else like that. Then I kind of stopped being so ashamed and I started embracing the fact that, maybe I wanted to turn over a new leaf and maybe all this frustration was just a will deep down inside me to just want to do better. If you guys have hard parents who aren't necessarily the greatest at motivating you or just aren't clear whenever you have conversations with them, sometimes it's not them being overly misunderstanding or overly difficult. Sometimes it's just simply them trying to just push you out, but they don't know how to do it. Because what parent wouldn't want their kid to just be their best self? No parent wouldn't want that. And, the problem is when somebody just wants to see somebody succeed so bad, they just push so hard that sometimes it can come off as too much. Because too much of anything in this world is just negative and, it turns into a pride battle really, really fast. Basically, what I'm getting at is whatever you may be addicted to, whether it be something lustful, whether it be something out of gluttony, sloth, whether it be laziness, whatever your bad habit is that you think is stopping you from being a better person, from leveling up, from looking at yourself in a positive way, instead of just yelling at yourself all the time and being frustrated that you do this negative thing, instead ask yourself why. Because I asked myself why, and then I thought about just why I would go on this, and then I just started to try and coexist with my coping mechanism, and then I stopped feeling so ashamed, because it's so easy to just shame yourself and say, oh, I'm such a failure, I'm doing all this wrong, I'm not doing everything perfectly, but, the truth is, you could be so much better than what you are with those unhealthy coping mechanisms. Hypothetically, you don't need the perfect routine to start anything you want. Some of the best and most high performing people that I talk to in my life, when I look at their routine, they are not the ones biohacking. They are not the ones emphasizing every little bit of detail in their life to be perfect. But they are the ones who embrace the fact that life comes with mistakes and that it is impossible to just have the perfect day. You know, they're the ones who are the most human, not only to others, but themselves. And they reconcile with the fact that nothing can just go to plan all the time. Therefore, if one little aspect in their day is negative, it doesn't matter to them because it will never outshine the mountains and mountains of positives that they have in their life. And I know it can seem like a lot, but hearing this should kind of take the weight off your shoulder, because when you just expect yourself to do everything perfectly every single day, that kind of also brings in the expectation that you should also get all the results that you wanted. Results and hard work cannot coexist because they're not linear. There's a reason why you see a lot of people who are lazy and don't work towards their goals achieve theirs before you, and you could be hardworking. And that's just simply because your hard work isn't always effective. You know, it's impossible for every bit of work that you do to actually just resonate within you. You know, it's the same way you can't learn every piece of information in a classroom. We forget things. And what I'm getting at is that I made the mistake of thinking that I needed to wait for every little aspect of my life to just turn around. And I needed to just wait to feel happy. You know, even when I was doing all these things correct in my life, like waking up early, eating healthy, and not doing any of my bad habits, I thought that I was doing better, but then I realized why I was doing these things. You know, I wasn't actually doing it because I wanted to do them. I was doing it out of fear that I might get pushed back. I wasn't not doing my unhealthy coping mechanisms because I broke free from them. I was actually just hiding out of fear the whole time. And friends, when you act out of fear and scarcity in your life, that just teaches your mind that you think that you will run out of blessings in life. You know, as long as you wake up every day and you can at least find one thing to hold gratitude for, you have won the day, because that's a step further than 85% of people will take every day. You know, there's a reason why in the news you only see negative things. Everything in your environment can bring you down so easily. However, if you allow yourself to just, I always used to think I have to be above my environment. I have to be above all these negative people. But all this time, I needed to just put the attention back on me and realize that I don't need to be above anybody else, because that's an extraneous thing that I just don't need in my life. You know, when I started pouring my energy on being grateful for what I have and just being grateful for the blessings of my life, I stopped feeling the urge to just work so much harder, because I realized that, you know, I don't need hard work to be successful, because life is already hard enough as it is. And I think that adding more challenge is just frankly silly. And I can say it's silly because I've made those mistakes. I wasted so many years of my life trying to make it perfect out of fear that I would be behind if one aspect of my life was imperfect, or if one thing in my life went negative. I was so afraid that I would just be catapulted backwards, and I was so scared of just regressing, because I just lived in a hole for so many years of my life. And I just felt like there was there wasn't really a point to living. But, you know, as I've kind of matured, I realized the abundance of blessings that I hold in my life. I'm not saying the goal is to just be overly grateful because that can piss me off too. But, you know, at least if you can find one or two aspects in your life that you can just really hold gratitude for and it actually resonates with you, has to be the most important thing. Don't just say like, oh, I'm grateful I woke up. It's like, you probably don't give a fuck that you woke up. You wake up every day. But, you know, if you can find something or someone that you can really appreciate, even if that somebody is yourself, then you've won. But this is just a disclaimer to anybody who hyperfixates on improving their life is whenever addictions happen in your life and throughout your trials with breaking bad habits and addictions and bad patterns in your life, you know, outright fighting it, you'll never win. And that statement right there, even to myself, is such a challenge to my pride. However, once I started accepting that I don't have to win and I can just pour the energy that I used towards fighting a losing battle into creating something new for my own life, I just started to feel an abundance of freedom because I just didn't have to fight something that I knew I was just going to give up on later. But instead, when I allowed myself to just create a reality where I didn't have to fight, I didn't have to be perfect. You know, I could still even do my bad habits if I really felt like it, but I could just do it less. Even then, that was all I needed. And that was all the evidence that it took for me to just realize that trying to break your addictions will leave you even more addicted. And I know it's such a silly statement, but you know, you're better off trying not to break it and just living your life and just doing it a tiny bit less each week, each month, even if it's only, you know, you're only off your phone for 1 minute less each week. But if you keep that consistency up over the course of years, there's lots of weeks and years. And if you keep that consistency up in a couple years, that's even more time. But, you know, just because something's outright negative doesn't mean it's just gonna spiral your life downwards. You know, because negative things can be very positive and impactful in your life. And I think it's important character development that we all be addicted to something at some point. Because when you're down here, you know that it's everything you want to just get back to where you know you belong. And, you know, when you hypothetically do reach where you belong, it's not like you just avoid everything you did down here out of fear, because that's just gonna leave you dormant right in the middle. And when you're right in the middle and you feel numb and you don't feel anything, and you're only doing things out of fear and pattern versus actual true desire, that right there will just leave you even more downwards. But I think it's important we all be addicted to something bad at some point in our life. And I think we all are. You know, nobody's perfect. And whatever it is you're fighting, just don't ever look at yourself in a shameful way just because you indulge in that activity. Be a human with yourself and help yourself like you would help others, I think is when I started trying to actually be there for myself. I basically transformed my life. You know, I even did unorthodox things like talk to myself And, talking to yourself isn't crazy. It's it's gonna bring things out because, not everybody understands you on a deep level. Therefore, who better to understand you than yourself? Ask yourself difficult questions. Ask yourself the why behind your actions. The how can I do better? How can I look at things in a different perspective? It's not just the what you do in your day, but it's how you operate and why am I operating that way? I know it can sound so hard, especially when you're still deep in addiction and you're still deep in shame from being addicted to that thing. But, if you don't ever even start, then what's the point? It's scary to start and it can feel like you still have so much work to do. But, if you just allow yourself to don't even focus on what's in front of you, just focus on what you feel that you would actually like to do. Not what other people on the internet just tell you is right, like me, but actually gather some advice that you can take that stems from you. Therefore, it'll stick with you and you won't just forget it. But, please don't ever think that you're any less of a human than somebody who appears to be healthy and not addicted to anything and perfect and a role model. Everybody, and I mean everybody, is addicted to something. And those who try and live perfectly, they don't do it out of anything but fear. If you see somebody living like a perfect way and scared to eat junk food all the time or just scared to even do one thing negative, don't ever feel like less in their presence. The highest performers are the ones that embrace failure and embrace their own humanity. So every day you wake up, don't choose to be a biohacker. Don't choose to be perfect. But not only choose, but dare to take the risk each day you wake up. Dare to take the opportunity to think about your life in a new way. Because why not? You don't know what comes next after this. You don't know what comes after next week. But you have the opportunity each day to control how you respond to things. And when mistakes come, will you wish that everything else was just perfect? And will you wish that you were in your past? Or will you be grateful that you get this challenge and embrace it? Dare to do something different for once in your life. Different in a way that means not something that's socially accepted, but internally accepted. Something that you would like to do that maybe not other people agree with. Take those opportunities. But that's about all I have.